Welcome to Powering Through Life, and I'm your host, Teresa Sims. Each week on Powering Through Life, my guest and I will discuss a special topic that is close to their heart. Together, we will explore the challenges they have faced in life and learn what strategies and tools they have used to power through their life. So welcome to Powering Through Life. Hi, and welcome to Powering Through Life. And my guest today is Gregory Downey. And Greg is known as the GREATitude coach. He is a best-selling author of Attracting Miracles and My Secret Life as a Miracle Coach. Ooh, I love that topic. He's also an international high-performance personal development coach, master mindset coach, and belief breakthrough expert. And Greg's expertise includes helping clients identify and overcome limiting beliefs, increasing powers of creative visualization, law of attraction, and strengthening intimate relationships. Gregory, thank you for being with me today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, Teresa, thank you for inviting me. And I am so grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, I just love chatting with you anyway. So this is a great time to be able to do this. So in keeping with our Powering Through Life theme, would you please tell our listeners what adversities or challenges you had to overcome when you were a child?
So I grew up in a broken home. I lived with my mother until I was about 3 years old, and then moved in with my father, who was an alcoholic, drug addict, was very abusive emotionally, verbally, and physically. And that was the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in an environment where I never felt safe. I never felt belonging. Was always taught to not trust my feelings and to not feel that I was allowed to have feelings. Was always told that I was called names if I expressed emotion, if I cried, or if I was sad or scared. There wasn't a lot of nurturing, and that was just basically how I grew up. By the time I was in elementary school and junior high school, my biggest fear every day was, am I gonna get beat when I get home? Is my father going to be waiting to hit me when I come in the house? And there were times where I would come home and he'd be, waiting for me kind of in this dark alcove in our kitchen where the laundry was. And he would hear me walk across the gravel. And if he was angry for some reason, he would get up out of his recliner, go wait for me to come in the door. And he would try to, hit me undetected. And so a lot of times, I'd come into the house and that would be my greeting. And then I'd have to run to my bedroom and, try to outrun him. And then he'd usually follow me. And, so I spent a lot of time trying to hide under my bed, to get away from him when I was younger. And, that was how it was. You just, you never knew when he was going to get angry and throw something, or get angry and, haul off and smack you, and you weren't expecting it. And so that was a big part of it. However, I think the most difficult thing was being told that I was worthless, being told that I would not amount to anything in my life. He used to say things like he would take me out in the backyard and shoot me and bury me, and nobody would care. Nobody would miss me. And looking back on it, I realized that it was the verbal and emotional abuse that had the greater impact than any of the physical abuse. The physical pain goes away, doesn't really linger, but it's the emotional and mental pain that tends to last the longest. And it culminated when I was 15 years old. He attempted to take my life, and by a miracle, the gun that he had put against my head didn't go off, and I was able to get out of the truck and to escape being in that situation. And I talk about that actually in my book. And so, yeah, that was just kind of how it was, until I got to a point in my life where I started to figure some things out and to realize that it was he that had the problem and it wasn't me.
And that's the best thing that you can acknowledge and recognize for yourself, because that's when the healing starts to take place, right? When you make that acknowledgement that you aren't the problem, he is, and take steps to put the problem right where it belongs and to take the best care of yourself. So what did you do? What did you do to take care of yourself?
It's interesting because when I left that environment, I actually ended up being on the streets and living with friends and sleeping in friends' cars, and I spent a whole winter actually sleeping on a friend of mine's back porch. There wasn't a place for me in the house because his live-in girlfriend, he was a little bit older than me, but his live-in girlfriend didn't really want somebody living with them, but they did have space on this back porch area that was semi-enclosed. And so that was, so I lived there for a while and then ended up moving in with a cousin who I ended up sharing rent with. And, the most profound thing was having a deep sense of higher purpose. And I look back and realize that even from a young age, I used to wonder about the big picture. I used to feel that there had to be more to life than I was experiencing. And so for a number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, my biggest frustration was feeling like I was meant for something, but not knowing what to do or how to, or just not knowing what to do or how to make that a real thing. And feeling like I needed somebody to invest in me, but nobody was, and it's interesting because by the time I was about 17, 18, I started listening to Wayne Dyer on public television during fundraising drives. And that really opened me up to a new way of thinking. And then I would stay up late and watch Tony Robbins infomercials and started getting exposed to these different ways of thinking. And that led me to secondhand stores and used bookstores and finding books about personal development. I was basically broke, couldn't really buy new books, but I'd go out and I would invest in used books, 25, 50 cents, 10 cents, whatever. And I got really good at spotting titles of, books that were about personal development. Mm-hmm. And so I just started building my library and investing in my own education. And it was by the time it was about the middle of my 19th year before I turned 20 that I'd kind of come around a corner, had somewhat of a spiritual awakening, and then made a major transformation. Just realized that I can't live that way anymore. I have to follow what it is that I feel inside, because I feel like I'm meant for something more. And I started to find answers and started to take action. And I started to draw lines in the sand. And I made a decision that I could never go back to being lost, that it just was no longer an option.
Well, it's not only just feeling lost, it's like you're dying inside and there's nothing, right? It's a big black void, and that's not the way we're meant to be. We're meant to live, thrive, and grow. And so when did you learn to be able to trust your gut feelings? Was it during that transition time?
That's when it started. But where I really started to trust my gut was probably by the time I was about 23. I had a mentor. I was selling Kirby vacuum cleaners, and his name was Del Thompson, and he was a Kirby dealer in the town where I was going to college in Idaho. And we'd spend a lot of time, in his van going to places where we were going to sell Kirby's. And I had a lot of exposure to audios, and he'd feed me more books. And it was really, I think that relationship with Del, he was a really powerful mentor in my life. I think that was when I really started to believe a bit more in myself and in my ability. And it was his willingness to invest in me that opened me up to really listen to what he was saying, because it wasn't just words. He was really investing in me. He was investing in my skill set, investing in my success. He was investing in my livelihood, and he really taught me a lot about trusting what my feelings were, and what my hunches, I guess, were, if for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
So it was by the time I was about 23 that I really started to tap into my inner guidance system, I guess, if you will.
And how much of a difference did that make in your life and what you were planning on doing?
It made all the difference. I mean, obviously, I it didn't perfect everything, but it started to steer me in a direction and give me a more sense of definiteness, or I guess a sense of certainty, and knowing the direction that I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. And was it odd for you in the beginning when Del started to take an interest in you? Did you feel a little uncomfortable, like, I'm not worth this? Why is this guy spending so much time on me? I'm not really.
Oh, absolutely.
How those limiting beliefs come back and
why me? Why not somebody else?
Yeah.
What does he see in me? Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because fast forward later on, I got to a place in my life that was kind of a crossroads and a place of crisis. And I talk about the crisis in my book, but I didn't talk about the experience that I had with Del. But I had this dream where, and it was kind of interesting because Del liked to dance. That he grew up in Southern California, and he and his wife did a lot of ballroom dancing, and he was really into this kind of whole road show, Disneyland type, productions, and really liked dancing. And we'd be talking, and he'd share some principle of personal development, and he'd kind of get excited, and he'd break out like in a dance move, and it was interesting because he would dance at random, you kind of do these random dance poses at, and it was kind of interesting seeing, this guy that's in his late 60s, but just full of youth, very robust. And I had this dream, and I really was at a crossroads, and was struggling to overcome some of the beliefs that I had that were coming from my father. And it was the first time that I think I've ever experienced a catharsis, like a heaving catharsis. And it was just over this idea that I couldn't let my father be right. I felt like I was failing, and I had made some dumb choices, and I felt like that was proving that he was right. It was proving all the things that he said right. And it was such an emotionally effective thing, and I just, it had this this huge catharsis. And that night I had a dream about Dell. And in the dream, I was sitting on the curb, and the van was parked there, and we were talking, and he jumped off of the curb, did like this dance move like Dell, would, and did this dance pose. And then he said, son, he said, you just got to do what you were meant to do. And I remember waking up, and realizing, he's right. I just got to do what I was meant to do. And none of the things that my father ever said would ever matter. Well, it had such a huge impact, and it was such a turning point for me that I thought, I should call Dell and tell him about this dream and thank him. Well, his wife answered the phone and said that Dell had passed away just about 30 days before.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it?
And I believe that Dell Thompson had come through the veil into my dream and was intervening in my life. That he still was interested in me and interested in what was happening in my life, even beyond the veil, that he still had a personal interest in my success. I believe that with everything I am.
I would totally agree, because I have similar. In what your father was doing was not who you are. It's who he was. And
that's right. And when I shared that with Sally, when I shared that with Dell's wife, I told her, I said, he jumped off the curb, struck a dance pose, and said, son, you just got to do what you were meant to do. And she's like, that is so Dell. Because, she married to him for years. And that was exactly, who Dell was. That was, and he did it in a way that, that I would not be able to deny that it was real, that it was that was Dell intervening in my life at a time that I needed divine guidance, that he was an angel for me.
Absolutely. And those angels really do exist. I totally believe in that as well.
I believe it 100%. Yeah.
So have you had that experience since then? Or was it just the one time that?
Yes. Yeah. So my wife's grandfather intervened in my life through a dream later on at another point. And he did it in a way that made it clear that, and he revealed something to me that I could not, that he knew that I did not know about his life with my father-in-law. And it was a story that, like, somehow he never told me, but in this dream, he was giving me counsel. He rode up to me on this snowmobile, like a skidoo, but it was a snowmobile that he had made out of, like farm equipment parts and an old motorcycle engine. And they had actually made two of them, and they used them for hunting out on these prairies in Idaho. And they would use them to pull elk and to pull deer. And he rode up on it. We had this conversation, and then he rode off and kind of rode through this ditch and off into this pasture. And but it was the words of counsel that he gave me that were really profound. And I asked my father-in-law, I said, Dad, did you and Granddad make your own snow machines when you were a kid? And he looked at me, he said, why? And I said, is that something that you guys did? I said, because I had this dream about Granddad a few nights ago. And I said, he rode up to me and I described it. And he said, well, I'll be darned. He said, that was Granddad. He said, yeah. he said, when I was in elementary and middle school, he said, Dad had decided to make these snow machines that we would use for hunting. And they would also use them to chase down coyotes.
Right.
And I described them, and I had never seen pictures, didn't know anything about it. And he said, yep. He said that, and that sounds like something that Granddad would say. And it was when we were making the decision to whether or not we were going to come to Sweden. And so it was, but I had another intervention with my grandfather, which is kind of what started me wanting to reinvent myself. And that was when I was about 18, that I had a dream where he had come back from being dead, and we had an interaction. And what was interesting was, after that time, the thing that he left me so that I wouldn't doubt, my own sanity, because, we can sometimes gaslight ourselves a little bit if we're not careful,
Yeah.
And after I had that experience, I sat up in my bed and I took a deep breath, and I could smell my grandfather's aftershave in my bedroom. Like it was plain as day, as though he had been standing there and walked out of the room. And I wasn't an extremely spiritual person at that time, or at least I didn't, realize that I was. And my grandfather had been passed away for about 2 years at that point. And that was a turning point that kind of, set me to seeking answers. But it was also the turning point that I think started the biggest battle in my life, because, I realized that I was born for great things. And I don't know if people, that are listening to this believe in good and evil, and believe, in God and Satan, whatever you call it. But I believe it was at that point that the battle for my soul began, that I was awakening, and I was going to discover my purpose in life. And I believe that there were dark forces that thought they had me wrapped up, and they weren't willing to let go. That I represented something valuable to them, because I was making a lot of bad choices at that point in my life. And here I was choosing that I was going to move out of the darkness and into the light. And that was the first big, profound spiritual experience that I had.
And that's an amazing step to take. And I think I've honestly felt that same tug of war as well. And it's not pleasant when you feel like you're going to fall off the cliff into this big pit. And yet know in your heart that there's something you're meant for. You just can't figure out what it is. Or you haven't had the guidance to find out what it is, or to explore. And
or you look back. When you look back, you see that things were put into your life that were designed to throw you off track, or to trap you or trip you up.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've seen that too.
Yeah. And that's why the world needs sometimes just compassionate people to help them.
Absolutely.
Talk, to share, to interact. And that's what we do on a daily basis, right? As coaches, we just kind of help people get through the fog, get through the stuff, the mud, the blood, whatever you want to call it, that keeps them stuck and trapped. And I know for you, it's been
and I'll tell you the thing that has given me probably the strongest ability, like the thing that has magnified my ability to work in the lives of other people, was making the decision that I needed to first help people have a better life at whatever the cost, whatever that I had to put aside all other motivation, and that I had to make my life about helping other people to have a better life. As a husband, it's my role and responsibility to help my wife to have a better life. as a father to help my children have a better life, as a friend, as a son, as a brother, that my role is to connect with people in a way that helps them to have a better life. And that has opened up the universe to guidance that I don't think I could have ever expected on behalf of other people, not just for myself, but receiving divine guidance that leads me in how I need to help others, like what I need to do, what I need to say, what I need to offer, questions I need to ask. And it's because my first purpose is to help people have a better life.
Do you feel, Gregory, that divine guidance, when we receive messages like that it's not necessarily about us, it's for us?
No, it's
in service of someone else.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. And what's interesting is when you commit to first help other people have a better life, that's when divine says, okay, I can use you as a conduit because there's no ego there, right? For the first part of my coaching career, there was a lot of worry about feeding my family and making money and chasing money. And, going through the humbling that I went through with making a terrible financial mistake and, losing a lot of material things and, going from being, a homeowner in a paid off home to renting a duplex and having to, deal with neighbors and, kind of being reduced to the things that I believed were signals that I wasn't successful, and then coming to terms and being okay with that, being okay with not fitting that picture. And then going through all of the anxiety that came after that and the panic attacks and, those things made me infinitely more compassionate for people because I saw that people couldn't see what I was dealing with, and therefore I couldn't see what other people were dealing with unless they would tell me, right? They had to, because a lot of times we don't see it. We don't know what they are experiencing on the inside. And therefore, the only thing that we have to offer the Creator is to be loving and compassionate. That's all we have. That's all we can do in return for the blessings that we have, is just to be loving and compassionate to other people. Yeah. That's really all we have. Yeah. All I can do is and second, to be willing to work to help people have a better life. And
do you feel
those two things have?
Do you feel that being put back into that place in time with the duplex and the stress of feeding your family and all that was put in front of you for a specific reason at that point in time to wake you up for some greater purpose?
Yeah. Absolutely. I would have never been able to fulfill my potential as a coach if I didn't lose this perception that I had to create this picture of success. It was all ego. The house, the vehicles, the toys, it was all ego. Because I believed that I needed to prove my father wrong. That I had to prove my father wrong, and I had to prove all of the people that ever said that I wouldn't amount to anything, that I had to prove them wrong. That was my egoic compulsion. I could never, if I said, go ahead.
When did that stop?
That stopped. That stopped when I realized that the only way to free myself from the anxiety was to get present. But it was a conversation that I had with my wife. And I talk about this in my book. We were backing out of our driveway, and I forget what I was talking about. And she told me I was full of it, but she didn't say full of it. And my wife usually doesn't use bad language, but she said, you're full of crap, basically. And I was like, where did that come from? She said, you sit on the phone with your clients and you tell them that they have to be grateful for where they are. that they have to live in the moment. You tell them all these things that you're not doing, and look what it's resulting in. Your problem with anxiety and panic is because you're so worried about the past and so hung up on the future that you can't live in the moment. And that was the best advice I'd ever gotten.
That's a heck of an awakening, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was when I learned to get in the moment, and I learned, to be in touch with what I was experiencing, that I realized that, oh crap, like we really don't know what other people are experiencing if they don't tell us. And it drove me to be more compassionate. And that desire, that wanting to be more compassionate, opened me to other ideas that I don't think I was ready for before. And, I started looking at things from a different perspective. And, I became exposed to this concept that everything that we do is about connection. Everything that we do in business, everything that, our relationships, everything is about connection. And if you really want to succeed, you have to want to connect with people in a way that's authentic. And the only way for people to feel that you really have their interest at heart is to have a pure desire to help them have a better life. That's it. Everything else is bullshit.
Yeah.
And they'll see right through it. Excuse my language.
Yeah, well, that's the truth, really, and I think,
Yeah.
When we get to be at a place of peace within ourselves and recognize the gifts that we've been given, and we have the ability to help someone else, that's where the pure peace comes in, is when we start giving to others and we start helping others. It doesn't hurt us at all, and I think it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, and I hope you thanked your wife for that.
Oh, many times. And I would have been highly remiss if I didn't publicly acknowledge her in my book, because I've always, even before that, I used to say that she's my warm personal enemy, right? She's the person that says, that tie really sucks, but I love you, or that she's able to just, be brutally honest. And that took courage for her to do that. That took a lot of courage for her to be willing to confront me on that level.
Yeah.
Because, before that, I was a guy that I didn't like to be contradicted. That was part of my ego.
Yeah.
And she just laid it out there. She just walloped me. And I told her, I said, I appreciate that you are willing to let go of whatever the outcome was going to be from that.
Well, that just proves that she loves you that much, that she's willing to, go to that extreme. So that's fantastic. So, Gregory, what 3 pieces of information would you leave our listeners with as to the best way to go about changing your situation? Does that make sense? Is that a good starting point?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I'll tell you, if you follow these 3 steps, it'll just lead to your best life ever. Number 1 is you have to get present. You have to learn to take time every day to get present.
And what does that mean?
That means get present with yourself, and to look inside and to actually become aware of what it is that you're feeling at any moment. I tell people to check in regularly, to get present, to become aware of what your emotional patterns are. And if there's anything emotional that's happening that you wouldn't choose for yourself or that you're not happy with, then choose to take action. Don't let it stay there.
That's those automatic thoughts that come in, right? That we have a lot of times and we're not even aware of it. Those automatic thoughts come in, and our mood changes, our personality can alter.
And we may not notice it. And if you're not checking in, if you're not getting present, then you're on autopilot. And that leads to suffering, and all self-sabotage comes from suffering.
Yeah.
And so you get present, you become aware, and then you make a choice to take action. If I was going to throw some gravy on that, it just goes back to emphasizing, this idea that you have to make your life about helping other people have a better life, and then you'll get anything you want. Everything that you could desire will come to you if you're committed to work to help people have a better life. You often hear people say, I'm following my passion. I was told to follow my passion. The success isn't coming. It's because that's self-centered. If you make it selfless, meaning that if you work to help other people have a better life, you can work your passion into that. And then the doors open, the doors of abundance, they just open.
Absolutely. Because, we're not meant to live in isolation. We're communities. We're meant to be in communities. We always, from the beginning of time, have lived in community aspects. So in service of each other.
It's all about connect.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's all about connection. It's interesting. I'll just share this little thing. It gives people something to think about. A substitute teacher never gets the respect or the love of the students that are in the class because the substitute teacher doesn't have a connection. The students don't trust they don't trust yet that teacher is there to protect them and to have their best interest at heart. There's no connection. And when there's no connection, it can't be expected that those kids are going to behave in a way that the teacher would like to. And so the teacher then has to resort to, corporal punishment or firm discipline. And that is I believe that's opposite of God's design, that we want to perform and please. We want to perform for and please those that we feel a connection with. And that's how parenting is done. That when you form those bonds and you create that safety, the desire to do the right thing is automatically there. And so, if I could tell people anything, just go out and create, bonds of love and compassion. Just go out and serve people.
That's a great piece of information. That is fantastic, because once we do something for someone else, it makes our hearts sing, but it also, look at the face of the person that you're helping.
Absolutely.
Watch their face, watch it light up. I mean, there's a lot of people around my area that are starting to tie the winter coats around the trees and telephone poles, because it's kind of cold here, and where you are too.
Yeah.
And, one homeless person, you don't even have to see who it is. You don't.
Right.
It's just a matter that in your heart, you've done something awesome for another human being. And that's what it's
Sometimes it feels better when you know that they don't know who you are, because then there's no ego.
Yeah.
Right? You're not doing it for recognition. You're just doing it to make a difference.
Absolutely. So how can we get in touch with you, Gregory, if someone wants to get in touch with you?
So I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. I sent all of the links on Facebook. You can just look for my name and find me. On Twitter, you can just look for the GREATitude Coach. And then on LinkedIn, you can just put my name in. I'm pretty easy to find. Or you can just Google me.
That'll work too. And I happen to know you're an awesome coach. I've had experience with you, and so has my husband. And and you were also part of my book journey to help me get connected with the best authorship coaches in the world. And I thank you for that. And
well, you're amazing.
Thanks. I see that you have a saying that you'd like to leave us with. Do you have that with you, or do you want me to?
Yeah. So doubt and fear are just scarecrows that stand in your field of view.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So they're not real. And scarecrows aren't real. And scarecrows, it's kind of a play on words, because, you usually see scarecrows standing in fields, right? And the things that we see, the things that we perceive, that are field of view, or you can, say that that, you call it your paradigm, but doubt and fear are just scarecrows. They're not real. And they're just put there. They're just put there to try to scare you off.
Roadblocks in the way of our path to our happiness and success.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Gregory. I really am so glad we finally got to do this, and we found a convenient time for both of us since we're in opposite countries. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I would love to have you back again. Yeah.
I would love to be here. Let me know any way that I can serve.
Thank you. So Divas and Hype Media Global people, thank you to our special guest, Greg Downey, for being with us today and for sharing the wisdom on just being you and being in service for someone else. That's where it all starts and that's where it all ends, isn't it, Greg?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon. That brings to a close another great, inspiring interview on Powering Through Life. Thank you to my incredible guest for sharing your thoughts and wisdoms with our listeners. If you would like to connect with us, go to www.teresasims.com, and there you will also find all the previous segments from many amazing and inspiring people. Remember, don't be shy. Reach out if you have any questions, or just leave me a comment. So thank you once again for listening to Powering Through Life.